If we were all the same, that would be boring.
Absolutely.
So because we have different personalities, we have different strengths. And I think that's what makes great relationships and friendships. You are strong in something that I may not be, and that's how we learn about each other. And I think it strengthens us as individuals, but it also forms really great relationships. So I think it's just really great to be yourself. You don't have to be just one way or one thing, just be yourself.
In this episode, we have Stacey Byer. She is a Caribbean author, illustrator whose childhood was filled with folk tales and adventure. After graduating from college with an illustration degree, Stacey used her skills to promote art, education and literacy on her island. Her experiences working with children have inspired her to create diverse stories everyone can enjoy. Stacey, why did you become an author?
It's a great question. So growing up in the Caribbean, we come from such a strong oral storytelling culture. But in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have access to many Caribbean books. So while my books are for everyone, it was really important that children from my region can access culturally relevant books, that they can open a book and see themselves, because we know representation is really important, see their culture, see their lived experiences, because I know that would have a hugely positive impact on them.
Although you are an author, Stacey, your background is as an artist as well, and I just feel that's quite important to share.
Right. So I did start off as an artist. I didn't know I was an illustrator as a child, because I was more comfortable painting my stories. I've always written, but I kept it a secret. I think my family knew, but that was it. I never said that I wrote stories, because I'm like, no, I'm not good at that. So my stories went into my artwork. So I did that for a really long time. And then as time went by and I grew older, I continued to write. And I think the turning point was actually the pandemic. I wrote a story about dealing with personal grief. And I thought about, right now with the pandemic, the whole world is going through this universal grief. Would this particular story help children and or people? So that was what kind of pushed me to start writing. But yes, I started off as an illustrator.
As an illustrator. So I suppose share some thoughts on yourself being an illustrator, in terms of, were you illustrating books? Was you producing artwork for others, etc.?
So I started off as a painter. I did my first degree in fine arts. So I just loved painting the Caribbean, sunsets, still life. You start off with the general stuff. But again, I think as time went by, we have this rich culture full of folklore and the things that we do. And I had such a vivid imagination as a child that I started creating my own worlds.
Wow.
And again, I didn't know at the time I was illustrating. So I continued it. And then I found out as a teenager, there's this thing called illustration. There's this field. And I was like, wait, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm interested in. So I went to college in the States, got my degree, returned to my island with all these big ideas. But at the time in Grenada, illustration wasn't a fully developed field. So I returned to painting, but I kept up with the illustration. And then I started partnering with nonprofits. And I started illustrating educational materials for kids. And I love that, because when I went to school, I was bored a lot. I was very restless. I'd rather be outside in the sun playing or drawing, the flowers in the garden. And I realized, because we're different learners, the kids that didn't have access to a lot of illustrated material, they struggled more in school, including me. So I was happy as an adult to start illustrating education materials that would help students like me. So it kind of became a full circle moment.
Yes.
I didn't know it was going to happen, but that's what ended up happening. So, and then from that, I started illustrating books.
Yeah, and I think it's quite, your career is quite interesting in the terms of being a painter, an illustrator and an author. And if you had to choose one, what would you choose? Do you have a favourite, or you're not allowed to have favourites?
I think I may be a little biased. It's easy to say illustrator, but I realized I was always an illustrator who wrote.
Right.
So now that I'm an
Yes.
author-illustrator,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, so you can, and actually I've had a few authors on the podcast who do both, who illustrate, who actually, I think all of them started off as illustrators, then became an author. Or I think one, Louise Stowell, her debut book, which is a series of books called Looking, that was her first book, and she illustrated and wrote both together, so she didn't start off as that. I, as yet to meet an author who has become an illustrator.
Okay. Yeah, that's
I know
interesting.
they're out there,
Sure.
but in terms of being on my radar, probably people listening and watching this podcast will be saying, screaming and shouting, "No, you could have said this person, that person." But you know, Rob Bidoff, he was a illustrator, so he illustrates his own books. Ramsey, Onyinyi, who's been on the podcast as well. But I know there are others out there, and when I'm with doing an event, whether or not it's a keynote with adults or I'm in a school, one of the children always asks, they always say, do you draw the pictures? And I said, no, it's the illustrations. I said, I don't.
Right.
But I'm always super grateful to the illustrators because they're able to bring my work alive.
Yes.
And I think that's the magic. And I think, oh my goodness me, this is fantastic, this book, because this is everything that I wanted and more. And did you get that yourself when you have illustrated work for other authors or commissioned, a piece of artwork?
Well, the first thing that happens with me is when I read the story, I know if I'm the right illustrator or not, because I read it and the images bloom in my head.
Yes, yeah.
I'm like, I can do this story justice. I'm meant to illustrate this story. So I think it's a privilege to be able to illustrate someone's words, because then, that picture book is a perfect marriage of words and images. So I've always loved that. But also on a personal level, I think being an illustrator made me a stronger writer. Because even when I started writing, if I get stuck with the story, I actually go over to a storyboard and I work out the scenes that way.
Yes.
And that's a big part of my writing and revision process. If I can't think of the words, I know the character. When I have a picture book idea, the character and world arrives in a package deal. And I think it's just because I'm an illustrator. So I see it first. And then I have to write it. And I'm like, I have to do this justice. Because this character is speaking to me. This is the character's problem. This is the world that he or she lives in. Let me figure out the words that go with these images.
And that is a great point, because again, when I'm with children in a school or a festival, and sometimes they know that I'm coming as the author, they come up to me and they hand me their piece of, that it's their work. And indirectly, they have illustrated and written a book. And that's what I think children are doing, is that they're working out in their heads the illustrations, the artwork, and then doing the writing that goes with that particular artwork.
And children are visual learners.
Absolutely.
That's why we have picture books.
Yes.
That they learn through the pictures, and then they learn language, then they learn to read. Yes, I love that. And that's why children are the best artists.
Yes.
They're free and they're brave.
Absolutely.
And they're just able to create. And they use art and illustration to tell their stories before they begin to write.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're right in saying that. And I feel that as adults, I think we sometimes lose that ability.
I think so, yes.
Because I always say I can't draw, but actually technically I probably can if I put my mind to it, if I went on to a beginner's course, how to draw, because when I was on the podcast with Rob Bidoff, I had that conversation with him that I planted that seed in my head as a child, because I was comparing my artwork with one of my friends. So it's about saying an art is subjective, right?
Yes, it is.
You know? Yeah.
And I always say good art it's connected to who you are. It's self-expression.
Exactly.
So technically you cannot judge art as good or bad. When you go to school, you have to do exams, you have to, develop your skill set. Then of course there's a grading system.
Yes.
But we should never be telling a child that something is good or bad. That's what I'm saying. They're the best artists because their imagination's unleashed. So that's why the work is so good. And I feel like a lot of writers and illustrators who are parents, I'm sure their children are their number one inspiration and resource.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because you take from what you see and your environment, and you're retelling that story within a children's book.
And another thing about becoming an artist and drawing, I think people forget that it's a learned skill.
Yes.
I think we rely on this whole idea of talent a lot, that, oh, this person's talented, that's why they can do it. A child could be exposed to art at a younger age compared to another child, so that first child would probably do it easier, but everyone can learn to draw. This is a fact. It's like everyone can learn to ride a bike. So I always say that, don't think that you're removed, that you can't do this. You can learn to draw. I've taught people how to draw.
Yeah. You need to teach me then, Stacey.
Yes.
So when I come to Grenada, you're going to give me a class on how
I will.
to...
Beginners. It all
class.
starts with shapes, and then we learn how to put the shapes together, and the shapes make forms, and then you'll be off.
I'm an early years teacher, so I get shapes.
Yes.
I understand
Shapes are good.
So I'm there. So
Good.
I've made one step already. So talking about myself being an early years teacher, working with children, as a child, what was your favourite book?
Ooh, this is a hard question because there were so many, but I really love Becca Lamb by Z. Edgehill. I read it for the first time at 13 years old. We study a lot of books for literature class in high school, and that was one of the first books. And I was impressed with it because I felt like it was one of the best representations of a Caribbean childhood, but especially from the point of view of a Caribbean girl, which is different. So that's one of my favorites. I read it every couple of years.
Yeah, it's just to refresh. And then talking about I'm St. Lucian heritage, although I am an adopted Grenadian.
You are. You are.
In terms of books coming through for children, what if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see more of within the Caribbean region in terms of children's books?
So the good news is it's already growing, so it's existing. And I think a lot of cultural stories, family dynamic, community support, the way that the Caribbean is really good at how tight-knit our communities are. I think talking about our foods and our culture and even our history, which is complex. It is very complex. But the ways that we approach it and what does that mean in, current day for the Caribbean region. I think, a lot of young Caribbean persons are now doing more with the environment, which is really important. We need to teach our kids that they are the future stewards of the environment and our island. So you have to care that it's not, our islands are not just for tourists. They're yours first, we're sharing them, but we need to tap into that sense of pride. So I think there are many things, and I think because I'm a little biased, but I think because the Caribbean is so interesting, because of its history and culture, there are just many aspects we can talk about.
Again, there's so many similarities and differences, that every child will be able to resonate with.
Yes.
But I feel it's important that those stories are part of the lived experience, you see. And I think for me, I would personally like to see more stories coming out of the Caribbean, because the talent is there.
Definitely.
In terms of when I've been to different Caribbean islands, you can see the talent is oozing.
Yes, it's there.
And it's remarkable to see. And when we are talking about children's books, I wish that when I walk into a big bookshop in the UK, that I can see books from Caribbean authors.
Yes, that would be
I think
lovely.
it's so important. But I feel it's authors like yourself coming through, sharing books that are going to go global, and, you know, parents, educators and teachers looking at those books and buying those books or loaning the books from the library for children to read and think, oh, this is a Caribbean author, this is a Caribbean story. What have I learned about this book? Oh, I didn't know this. This
What is
amazing.
relatable? What is different?
Exactly, as a conversation starter.
Definitely. And how exciting is it to learn about different people?
Absolutely.
And different lived experiences.
Exactly.
I mean, it would never be something that's subtractive. You know, you learn something, then you're like, oh, wow, I've never heard of that country. Let me go visit. This country has this, and the people are like this.
Yeah.
But the point is, you have these cultural divisions, but there are reasons why people are different, and we know we have the most important things in common.
But it's learning and understanding. It's learning and understand, because you learn so much. I always say, from reading a children's picture book, it's also for adults, because as an adult, you're learning as well.
I agree.
And that to me is super important, and long live children's books, right? Which brings me on to your Will and Krill, Stacey Byer.
Still can't believe it.
Illustrator.
Thank you.
So, Stacey, do you want to share a quick summary on Will and Krill? It's a beautiful name, by the way. It's a beautiful name for a book, because it just rhymes, flows off the tongue. As a verbally dyslexic person, it even rolls off my tongue.
That's great. That's good to know. Thank you. So yes, so this is my author-illustrator debut. It's the first picture book I've written, because I've only illustrated picture books before this one. And it's about a tiny, timid whale who finds it really difficult to make friends because she's so small and she's so quiet. And she's always overlooked and she's not included in anything. You can't see her, you can't hear her. And one day she's like, enough's enough. I want to find a friend. So despite her fear, she sets off on a journey into the deep blue ocean in search of a friend. And I think that's a great lesson.
I think so, and I think it's about then looking at this book and thinking, oh, around friendship. I think for me it's friendship and empathy as well.
And finding your voice and standing up for yourself and standing up for others.
Yes, and having the empowering, I think, children to have a voice. I think that is super important. That children are able to have a voice and children are able to be listened to, you know?
And we should listen to children.
Absolutely.
It's not just about disciplining children. Listen to children. Children, obviously, their little brains are developing, they're learning, they want to speak to you. We have to guide them, but listen to them, you know, empower them that they can come and speak to you and say how they feel. That's really important. And I think that's really good to not treat children as just, okay, they're small, you know, we have to take care of them, but they're also little people.
Yes.
You know, and they have great ideas, they have big ideas.
And what I love about this, I think I can look at this and see the, you know, the Caribbean feel, the ocean, etc. It takes me back on a cloudy day in the UK. I could just be in the Caribbean now and feeling that warm sea against my skin. And the illustrations, Stacey, are just absolutely amazing. I'm actually, you know, falling in love with them. But If you had to choose a favourite page, I know it's very difficult to ask an author illustrator in their own book, what would be your favourite page?
So my favorite would be the open spread where she's just about to swim off into the deep blue ocean. The scene is pivotal for the story, but I thought it was a great life lesson because for children and adults, we all experience these big moments, these scary moments, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with them. So we try to tap into some inner reserve of strength, and then we just go for it. And I think that's a great lesson for everyone to know that you could feel scared and still step up for yourself and try. One of my favorite quotes is, "Courage is fair walking." And that quote actually inspired that scene.
Yes.
Because she's still scared, but she's still going to go for it.
Yes, yeah. And one of the things I was hearing you say that, Stacey, with my educator's hat on, it's okay for children to have feelings and to label them. And we have to, as grown-ups, respect that. So if a
Yes.
child is saying, "I'm feeling angry,
Yes.
I'm upset today, or I'm feeling happy," and it's so important to give children the tools to self-regulate their behaviour, to label their feelings.
Yes.
And having a book to support that, because that's
Yes.
one of the things that I always say is, books are so important. It is the reading, but also for children to feel happy, sad, to feel joy, to laugh with the characters, and for using the adult reading the book with this child to expand that,
And
to expand on that with the
I agree.
child.
And that there are no negative emotions. That's really important. We're not meant to feel happy and brave all the time. Like I said, courage is fair walking. You could be scared and still try. So I think that's an important lesson.
Absolutely. Amazing. Absolutely. Some nuggets, some real nuggets that you're sharing here. So if you was interviewing yourself, what question would you ask yourself about this book?
I had to really think on this one. So I would say, why did I write the book? And I wrote the book first for my older sibling, who was very shy. So even when we were children, I recognized that she was navigating life a little differently from me. And then I wrote this book for all the shy and quiet kids that I end up teaching as an adult. And then I only realized recently I wrote the book for myself, a former loud child who's now a quieter adult. But I think the main focus is recognizing different aspects of personalities and that they're all great and they're fine. And our personality traits also may not be that opposite, but they all work. We all have different strengths. And I think it's important to recognize that we can be different and we all have different strengths. And that's why we all matter. Just existing, we matter the way we exist.
And that's a beautiful summary and reflection, because believe it or not, I was a very quiet, shy child. And a lot of people find that quite hard to believe, because obviously I'm hosting a podcast, right? But sometimes I can revert back to being shy and quiet, depending on the situation I'm in. And when I'm doing an assembly in a school and I've got PowerPoint presentation, there's a picture of me as a child, and you can see by my face I am looking very timid in this photograph. And I say back to the children, it's okay to be shy and to be quiet.
Exactly.
And I share that story for children in the audience who are shy and quiet. Then I flip it and say, it's okay to be chatty, to be loud. And I bring it back, because we're all unique.
And we're never just one thing.
Absolutely.
And that's the point.
Yes.
We don't have to be labeled as you're just an introvert or you're just an extrovert. Yeah.
Yes.
And you have these moments and you can change and you can develop. And I think that's the point
And
too
it's
with Will.
situational, isn't it? Because I said there's sometimes now that I can be that quiet depending on where I am. I like being and people think, you like being by yourself? because they can't believe it, because obviously they see me as being this author doing keynotes, etc. And I say, yes, I do love being by myself sometimes.
You could be both.
Exactly, and that comes back. You can be both. Sometimes I love socialising. I love being, you know, the life and soul of a party. And then another time I can revert back where I call it non-human contact.
Yes, I think it's an energy thing, because I'm a big people person too, and I like seeing people and meeting people. But after a while, you know, your battery gets a little low, and you're like, okay, I need to kind of go on quiet time and read a book. Just read a book in a quiet corner.
And interestingly enough, on many of these interviews so far, a running theme is around being yourself, for children to be themselves and to be proud of their personality, to be proud of where they're from. And I think that is coming from the author's semi-autobiography in terms of writing children's books, that when you're writing, it's a little bit of their own personal lived experience.
Definitely. And I think as creators, we're sometimes seen as the odd ones in society. But at the same time, I think even if we are shy, we're brave, because we're trying to be ourselves. And that's what we're telling through our stories. Be yourself.
Yes.
Everyone else is taken. Be yourself. And I love that. I think it's an honor to be part of a creative industry, because I think we're just trying to show how we feel, the things we've experienced, and I think we're sharing that to help others. I believe that's what we're doing. We don't want anyone to feel alone or left out. Will doesn't want to feel alone. No one wants to feel alone. So everyone needs to kind of seek out their tribe and community. And I think the more that you share the things you have experienced and the things that, you know, you have gone through, someone then goes, oh, I went through that too. So maybe I can be brave about this or that. Or
Absolutely. And I think that point that you was just making there, it leads me on to this question in terms of what would you like children to love about Will and Krill, or what would be their takeaways on the book for you?
So I would say that it's completely normal to be scared and be brave at the same time. That is normal. It's not just kids, adults, we feel this all the time.
Yes,
and that all personalities matter. And what I love about being different, we're all different. If we were all the same, that would be boring.
Absolutely.
So because we have different personalities, we have different strengths. And I think that's what makes great relationships and friendships. You are strong in something that I may not be, and that's how we learn about each other. And I think it strengthens us as individuals, but it also forms really great relationships. So I think it's just really great to be yourself. You don't have to be just one way or one thing. Just be yourself. You matter, and you know, everyone is included in a community. We don't want the same person over and over. You're strong one way, I'm strong another way, and that works perfectly fine, because we can learn from each other and develop and grow.
Absolutely, and that, I think, Stacey, is a wonderful point to finish on in terms of everybody matters.
Yes, everybody matters.
And I think that's great, I think, for children and adults to remember, is that we all matter. Everybody matters. Everybody matters.
Everybody.
So Will and Krill, author and illustrator, Stacey. One of the things I always say, go to your library, if you can go to your library, that is, and keep on reading and reading and reading. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you so much.
This podcast was woven in partnership with our friends at Tapestry, the childhood education platform. They have kindly devised the educational resources for each podcast interview. Tapestry helps you celebrate children's learning, improve communication with families, and streamline your admin with powerful booking, invoicing, and management tools. giving you more time for what matters, the children and you. Visit tapestry.info to find out more. This podcast series was recorded at the Quick Brown Fox Video Production Studios in Wandsworth Town, London, with top-notch equipment and a knowledgeable team who are always happy to help. Recording our podcast has been a breeze.